This is Jim Fetzer, your host on Authentic News, right here on RBN Live, the 7th day of April, 2025. Klaus Schwab stepping down from World Economic Forum chair, but after investigation, they found out they had a toxic work environment and the collapse of the globalist dream. But don't celebrate too fast. He won't actually be out of office until January of 2027. The sooner he's gone, the better. Article about it on my blog at jameshfetzer.org. Check it out. Meanwhile, we have Hal Turner. Zelensky says, talk about living in a dream, no troop cuts, no recognition of occupied territories. Hal Turner. Ukraine will not agree to reduce its army or recognize Russian-occupied land in future peace talks. Our priority is a strong military. No reductions, only modernization. Powell remarks. He again seals the fate of his entire country. Seems to me personally, unless he agrees to Russia's terms, it is clear to most Russia will simply continue to smash Ukraine till it either surrenders or no longer exists. I think this man is either detached from reality or suicidal, maybe both. He's got it right. Meanwhile, Larry Johnson talking about Iran stands firm. Yemen's missiles rock the U.S. Navy. We got an interview here. It's a little bit comical in its character. Let me move past.
Let's call them sand monkeys. They're primitive. They're poor. But yet, being primitive and poor, they have fought the U.S. government to a standstill for the last 16 months. 17. Pretty remarkable. Other countries around the world that have stood in fear of the United States got to be looking at that going, particularly like the Chinese. If a carrier strike group is struggling like the U.S. is right now to stop the flow of missiles, imagine what would happen if you put a carrier strike group off the coast of China. China's got some things that the Yemenis don't have. Number one, they've got ISR, they've got satellites. So they'll be able to locate the U.S. ships much quicker. And they have a larger array of hypersonic missiles. And they've got aircraft that can launch bombs and stuff. The U.S. ought to take a lesson from this, that when this one little country can fire 174 attacks on U.S. ships over the last 17 months, that's 10 a month.
Very impressive, in my opinion. Meanwhile, we got Claire Daly and Mick Wallace going to Yemen. It's heroism, not terrorism, they're reporting. I think they've got it exactly right. This is one of the truly admirable fighting forces the world has ever seen. They are so resilient. Activist former members of the European Parliament, Claire Daly and Mick Wallace, returned after a momentous trip to Yemen, where they attended and Mick spoke at a Palestinian solidarity rally of over 1 million. We discussed the U.S. bombing campaign they witnessed firsthand in Yemen, the resilience of the Yemeni people, the history of terror against them, and the attempt to block Israel's genocide against Palestine, which continues to be enabled by the West. Yes, how horrifying. Here's a nice little interview. If the U.S. can't beat Yemen, there's no chance against Iran. I think that's a very fair point. and I like it. Here we have Galloway.
On the Persian Gulf, on the Middle East region further, and indeed on many other things, is Professor Saeed Mohammed Marandi, the head of the American Studies Department at the University of Tehran. And it's always an honor and a pleasure, sir, to welcome you back on the Mother of All Talk shows. Thanks for joining us. Can you begin with a description of the atmosphere in Iran right now? Are people resigned to the likelihood of conflict, hopeful that it will be avoided, or are some actually even seeking it, determined to lance this boil once and for all? Just paint a picture for us, if you will.
I think you can find all three among ordinary Iranians. Those who are a bit nervous, those who think that if the United States strikes Iran, Iran has the ability to hit it back hard and end this once and for all, and those who are getting on with their lives who don't really think anything is going to happen. But one thing I think is quite clear, and that is that people are rallying behind the armed forces, and they see Trump as a troublemaker and as a supporter of genocide and as someone who's completely unreasonable. He has not made it easy for himself with this sort of behavior. He has united Iranians because all Iranians know that his demands, the demands of Trump, are completely unreasonable, and that the United States is a regime that invades countries that have weak armies and weak armed forces. So I think in general, it's quite clear that people will fight back if there's battle, but I think most believe that there won't be a war. I think that is highly unlikely, because if there's going to be war, the Americans are going to have to bring in well over 1 million soldiers, and they're going to have to bring their Navy and their Air Force from across the world. This is not the United States of the 1990s. They don't have that financial capability, and their rivals, including not just Iran, but Russia and China, they are much stronger today than they were 20, 30 years ago. The United States, we see what's going on with the stock markets and the trade war. It's just a very different world. And U.S. client regimes in the Persian Gulf, they know quite well that if there's a war between Iran and the United States, that their regimes will crumble, some within hours and most within days, and the global oil and gas markets will simply go through the roof and the global economy would collapse. So it's difficult to imagine a war. There could be airstrikes, but even those would be difficult, because I find it highly unlikely that the Americans will use Turkish airspace, even though Turkey has worked alongside the Israelis and the Americans during these years. But that's highly unlikely. Iraq, if anything happens there would be rebellion. And in the Persian Gulf, these countries would face the consequences. All the Americans could do would be to send a few B-2s or B-52s from Diego Garcia, and that would be roughly 5,000 kilometers. The flight would be about 5,000 kilometers to get to some place like Esfahan. And that would make them very vulnerable, and a few airplanes that are vulnerable really can't do the sort of damage that the Americans want them to do. We've already seen how in Yemen they failed. They've been unable to damage the underground missile sites and drone sites in Yemen. All they've done is destroy civilian infrastructure, homes. They've murdered people. They've brought down apartment buildings, and they've destroyed water installations for the general public. But they've been unable to deter the Yemeni armed forces, which are heroically fighting back. So if they cannot win in Yemen, I find it completely impossible for them to win against Iran.
What a wonderful summation. I love that. Terrific. That was from an Iranian intellectual. Simply excellent. Meanwhile, we got Sonar 21, NATO playing with fire in the Baltic and the Black Seas. Video here is a good summary of recent military encounters between Russia and NATO. It is good. Now, it starts off with just some imagery, and then it begins analyzing what's going on here militarily.
Judging by what is happening in the Baltic region, it becomes clear that the aggressive actions of the North Atlantic Alliance against Russian oil tankers and bulk carriers have only one goal: to turn the Baltic Sea into an internal sea of NATO. Even though NATO countries still accuse Russian ships of damaging underwater cables, the West was never able to provide irrefutable evidence of the veracity of these loud and provocative accusations. However, despite the lack of evidence, NATO countries continued to pursue and even detain Russian bulk carriers and oil tankers in the Baltic Sea. As a result, these provocative actions by the NATO countries forced Russia to act rather harshly. In particular, over the past 30 days, Russian warships and air defense systems have harshly suppressed attempts by NATO warplanes not only to harass Russian civilian vessels, but also to conduct reconnaissance activities, even in international airspace, over international waters. Furthermore, over the past 30 days, Russia's harsh actions towards the North Atlantic Alliance have been observed not only in the Baltic region, but also in the Black Sea. For instance, recently, the Russian corvette Boyki, seeing how the patrol aircraft of the French Navy, Atlantique II, was chasing a Russian oil tanker in the Baltic Sea, locked onto it, using the sea-based air defense system, Polyman Trident. Immediately after that, the French pilots stopped the pursuit of the Russian tanker and fled towards the NATO airbase in Sweden. A similar incident also occurred over international waters in the southeastern part of the Black Sea. The Russian air defense system S-400 locked onto a group of French Air Force combat planes. We are talking about 2 Mirage 2005 fighter jets and 1 Boeing E-3F Sentry AWACS aircraft. Even though these French warplanes were in international airspace, the Russian military ordered them to leave the area immediately. As a result, the French pilots had to abort their combat mission and flee towards the NATO airbase in Turkey. And now, it has become known about another incident involving French military aircraft. This time, the incident occurred in international airspace over the Baltic Sea, 80 kilometers from Kaliningrad. It became evident that the French Air Force's AWACS Boeing E-3F Sentry aircraft, along with the Dassault Rafale fighter jet that accompanied it, faced significant electronic radiation exposure. As a result, the navigation system on these French combat planes was disabled. The radiation was so strong that the French pilots could not restore the GPS signal, even after they were far enough away from Kaliningrad. As a result, the French pilots had to abort the mission and immediately return to the airbase. At the same time, the French pilots had to navigate exclusively along the horizon, using only visual landmarks. Moreover, on the same day, 2 patrol planes of the French Navy, Atlantique II, as well as NATO warships, located 150 kilometers from Kaliningrad, were also subjected to massive electronic radiation. Reports indicate that problems with GPS were observed in almost all NATO warships located in this area. The problems were so serious that NATO patrol planes and warships even had to stop patrolling the Baltic Sea in this area.
Do you get the message? NATO doesn't stand a chance against Russia. Their equipment is so sophisticated, it's idiotic. For the United States, with or without NATO, or NATO with or without the United States, to contemplate going up against Russia, much less Russia, Iran, and China. It's just ludicrous. Meanwhile, turns out Iran has new advanced radar that can see around the curvature of the Earth. Iran's Islamic relatively Guard Corps Air Space Force has been steadily expanding its network of Ghadar over the horizon early warning radars, with new construction sites identified in the northwest of the country near Tabriz and along the Persian Gulf coast. A development recently highlighted by open source intelligence analysts using satellite imagery from Google Maps and Google Earth signaled Tehran's ongoing effort to bolster its air defense against potential threats, particularly from the United States and Israel. Yes. Meanwhile, Russia warns against U.S. strikes on Iranian nuclear sites, catastrophic and illegal. Russian Foreign Ministry warned Thursday U.S. threats of attacks against Iran are unacceptable and can result in a catastrophe. Use of military force by Iran's opponents in the context of the settlement is illegal and unacceptable. Threats from outside to bomb Iran nuclear infrastructure facilities will inevitably lead to an irreversible global catastrophe. These threats are simply unacceptable. Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said she's right. Meanwhile, Kevin Barrett, Trump's war's doomed. This, my dear friend, has a wonderful article here. I'll read parts. Trump voters thought they were voting for peace, but circumstances are conspiring to make Trump the worst kind of war president, a loser. From a national leader perspective, there's nothing like losing a cataclysmically destructive war to make people hate you and revile your memory. Just ask Hitler. If he'd avoided that war, or better yet, won, he'd be remembered as a hero. Trump is lucky that most Americans haven't read Ron Hoon's free book, Our COVID Catastrophe. If they had, they know that the first Trump admin created the COVID crisis by launching an ill-advised bioattack on China and Iran. The U.S. bioattack on Wuhan and Qom didn't explode into World War III thanks to Chinese and Iranian restraint. But even while the Trump admin was sending BioWare operatives to the Wuhan military games in October 2019 to spray COVID all over the wet market, it was arming Ukraine to the teeth, employing those weapons in Moscow. When Russia inevitably responded in 2022, it wasn't just Biden's fault, but Trump's as well. This is one of the best pieces I've ever seen from Kevin, who writes a lot of good stuff. I highly recommend it.
I need somebody help, not just anybody help. You know I need someone help. When I was younger, so much younger than today, I never needed anybody's help in any way. Now these days are gone, I'm not so self-assured. Wedding has been, lives in a dream, waits at the window, wearing the face that she keeps in a jar by the door. Who is it for? All the lonely people. Where do they all come from? All the lonely people. Where do they all belong?
Well, are you surprised? Israeli official. Palestinians will be removed from Gaza after Hamas eliminated. An Israeli official made it clear Tel Aviv plans to expel the Palestinians from Gaza. This is called ethnic cleansing. When the hostages are freed and Hamas is eliminated, mind you, that's not going to happen. Throughout the conflict, the Israeli prime minister, who's right now in the Oval Office with Donald Trump, I'm embarrassed to tell you, I just witnessed on television during the break, publicly claimed the goals of military operation were returning Israeli captives and removing Hamas from power. According to Haaretz, however, a senior Israeli official traveling with Netanyahu explained, what we would like to see is that we rescue the hostages, eliminate Hamas, and then there's a large-scale opportunity for voluntary migration. And, of course, if that doesn't happen, we'll just kill them all. And here's his greatest supporter and beneficiary right there, hosting him in the White House. How awful. Meanwhile, Israeli investigators released tape proving that Jeffrey Epstein is alive and working for Mossad. Epstein found alive in Israel. Let's play a bit.
Today, we've got the inside scoop that's about to blow the lid off everything. Buckle up, because we're diving into an Israeli investigation, rogue, relentless, and risking it all, to prove that Jeffrey Epstein is still alive. That's right, alive. And we've got the drop on it before the gatekeepers, the spin doctors, and the cowards in the mainstream twist the news to suit the globalist agenda. You're hearing it here first, raw and unfiltered, because that's what we do. Epstein's faked death. It's not just a conspiracy, it's the conspiracy. The one that will bring the elite's whole house of cards crashing down in flames. This isn't some tinfoil hat rant. It's the key to unraveling their whole game. The blackmail, the lies, the New World Order itself. And who's breaking it? Us. We're the ones who exposed Epstein's filth years before the mainstream media grew a spine. We dropped Pizzagate, exposing the paedophile code words in John Podesta's emails when everybody else laughed. We cracked the Diddy list, named names, while the rest of the world ran scared. And guess what? We've been proven right about every damn thing. Now, we're bringing you the raw, unfiltered truth about Epstein's survival. No filters, no fear. But here's the catch. This is sensitive, explosive. We've got details, names, places, proof that could get us shut down. Mossad shadows, elite puppet masters, compromised politicians. They don't want this out. So we're locking it down for subscribers only. Want the full story? The tapes, the trails, the twisted details behind Epstein's new face and new mission? Get in before the gatekeepers bury it.
Hey, subscribers only, but there he is. There was a photo of him in Israel. I have no doubt about it. Meanwhile, Hungary host Netanyahu announces it's going to quit the ICC. On Thursday, Hungary hosted Israeli PM Netanyahu announcing it would be quitting the ICC, which has issued an arrest warrant for Netanyahu for war crimes and crimes against humanity in Gaza. So here you have Trump hosting the same guy, one for war crimes and crimes against humanity in Gaza, which he himself, Donald Trump, is supporting. The Hungarian government has decided to withdraw from the ICC. Hungarian PM Viktor Orban said in Budapest, alongside Netanyahu, was clapping during the announcement. Yes, how often can a mass murderer, a genocidal maniac, be so warmly received, in this case by Hungary, now today, right here in the USA? Meanwhile, Trump slams European lawfare tactics in a fiery defense of the French nationalist leader, Free Marie Le Pen. Here, in this instance, he's on the right side of history. U.S. President Donald Trump came to the defense of French far-right leader Marie Le Pen Friday, denouncing legal action against her as part of what he described as a broader effort by European leftists to silence political opposition through lawfare. In a post on Truth Social, Trump likened Le Pen's legal troubles to his own, claiming left-leaning politicians and lawyers are using the justice system to target their conservative opponents. Where have we heard that before? Meanwhile, over 30 people are being arrested daily in the UK for what they post on social media. The chilling crackdown at free speech in Britain is ramping up at an alarming pace, with over 30 arrests per day. British police are increasingly detaining individuals for social media posts, just expressing opinions.
Here comes the sun, doo-doo-doo. Here comes the sun, I say it's alright. To his knee, got to be a joker, he just do what he please.
We have Glenn Greenwald interviewing Professor Mearsheimer about Trump admin speech crackdowns.
You obviously care a great deal about academia. You work in academia. You have pretty much your adult life. It's something that I know you value. You've spent a lot of time here before talking about your ardent belief in free speech and how the attacks on protest are eroding it on campus. But now we have something in a different universe than what we saw in 2024. Not only these deportations of law-abiding, legal immigrants in the United States for the crime of criticizing or protesting Israel, but also, demands now that colleges and universities adopt this radically expansive definition of hate speech and anti-Semitism to include all sorts of criticisms of Israel, including now outlawing something you said earlier, which was comparing and contrasting Israeli actions with the acts of the Nazis. That is something that wherever this expanded definition of anti-Semitism is adopted would essentially could get you expelled if you're a student, potentially fired if you're an academic. But then on top of that, you have, this whole kind of climate where speakers are being disinvited if they're going to talk about Gaza. You have Middle East studies programs at Columbia being put under receivership at the demands of the Trump administration. At Harvard, you have the Middle East studies director and associate director forced out because they're not pro-Israel enough. What do you make of all of this in terms of the future of free speech and academic freedom in American academia?
Well, it's a disaster. There's just no question about it. Not only is free speech being attacked here, but I think that the Trump administration is bent on badly damaging universities. It's bent on wrecking them. When you come into a university from the outside, the way the administration is doing, and you dictate how that university is run in all sorts of ways that are completely antithetical to the way our great universities have been run for a long, long time, you are threatening the existence of some of the most important institutions, not only in the United States, but on the planet. I have a number of friends who are not Americans, who come from foreign countries, who can't believe what we're doing because they think that American universities are the most wonderful institutions in the world. This is not to say that our universities don't have problems. They do have problems, and those problems need to be addressed. But nevertheless, to bring a wrecking ball in and take places like Harvard and Columbia and Princeton and Penn, and now they've added Brown to the list, and take the wrecking ball to them, in my mind, is really just crazy. Why would anybody do this? But again, as I said to you before, Glenn, you do not want to underestimate how radical Trump is.
Yeah, well, just to make the argument that I hear often from Trump supporters and defenders of all of this, which is, universities used to be an epicenter of innovation and research and produced cures, created the internet. Mark Andreessen, a prominent Trump supporter, who obviously was instrumental in the creation of the internet with Netscape, told the New York Times that it was basically Al Gore, despite all the mockery he got, who really did lead the way in getting funding for key institutions to do the research that ultimately led to browsers and to the internet. That's been the history of American academia. The argument now is, look, now they're just hotbeds of left-wing ideology and gender studies and sociology. And beyond that, they can do whatever they want, but not if they're getting federal funding. If they're getting federal funding, they have to kind of align themselves with the ideology of the federal government, or, they don't have to get federal funding and they can do what they want. What do you make of those?
Look, I think there's no question that the political center of gravity in universities is too far to the left and needs to be pushed back towards the center. It's not as dire a situation by any means as critics on the right make out. But I would come at this whole issue from a different perspective. I wouldn't focus simply on the inventions that come out of universities. I would focus on the phenomenon of critical thinking. What universities do is they teach young people to think critically. Most young people have not figured out by the time they graduate from high school how to think critically, how to read a book and pick it apart and figure out what the author's argument is and how to counter that argument. And what universities are really good at is teaching young people, whether you're in the hard sciences, the humanities, or in the social sciences, to think critically. And
that's ideally the case. Let me just say, having spent 35 years offering courses in logic, critical thinking, and scientific reasoning, I would tell students who would come to my class the first day, and if they had come to the university to take only one course, this was the course they ought to take, namely the one in critical thinking. Today, I proposed to Hillsdale, they didn't show any interest, doing a critical thinking based on conspiracy theories, which forces you to think through the issues and run alternative points of view and find good reasons for resolving issues one way or another. For those of you out there, I'd say today, what you want to do is download my law enforcement false flag staged event checklist. It's available online. Law enforcement false flag staged event checklist. And go through the links I have there, such as how to spot a false flag part 1, how to spot a false flag part 2. Or if you're willing to invest more time but have a greater benefit, watch the longer version, 4 parts with Dr. Catherine Horton, a particle physicist from Oxford, just a brilliant woman, where our conversation deeply enriches the discussion about the false flag events we can cover there. And you'll be way ahead of the game. You'll develop a knack for sorting these things out. Meanwhile, Americans watch in horror as their savings are wiped out as Wall Street, see trillions evaporate. Now remember, these trillions are hypothetical. These are paper trillions. You put money in when you invest, buy stock. You get money out when you sell the stock, trade it, what have you. That's when you can determine your gain or loss. What goes on in the meanwhile, it can go way up, it can go way down. That doesn't mean you've necessarily thereby, other than hypothetically, lost money. Wall Street has had the worst 2-day wipeout in history. 6.6 trillion wiped off the value of U.S. stocks. After plunging yesterday, stock crashed again Friday, as it looks increasingly likely that President Trump tariffs will cause a global recession. By the way, I think that's debatable. U.S. stocks have lost about $11.1 trillion in value since January 17th, the Friday before Trump began his second term, according to MarketWatch analyst Dow Jones Market Data. About 6.6 trillion that was wiped out Thursday and Friday alone, marking the biggest 2-day loss to shareholder value ever recorded. Markets have seen bigger percentage drops. such as in 1929 when they tumbled 25% over October 28th and 29th that year, but never as much in dollar terms. Yeah, but if you take into account inflation, I'll bet you anything, those drops were greater in equivalent dollar terms. This week's carnage has hit ordinary Americans whose retirement savings, including 401ks, are tied to the market. What's going to affect me? My wife's been very worried whether we're going to be able to make ends meet with the market falling dramatically. We'll see. Meanwhile, a top Democrat, you can guess which state, asked for a nation to exempt them from retaliatory tariffs. Of course, Gavin Newsom said Friday, and then asked global trading partners to exempt the state from any retaliatory tariffs imposed on the United States. To our trading partners around the globe, California is here and ready to talk. We will not sit idly by during Trump's tariff war. We make up 14% of the U.S. GDP. We're the fifth largest economy in the world. We're not scared to use our market power to fight back against the largest tax hike in our lifetime. And bear in mind, that's a Democrat mantra, that tariffs are taxes. Remember, in the history of the United States, for the most of our history, the government was financed by tariffs. It wasn't until the beginning of the 20th century that this business about income taxes came into play and all that. So, I think there's lots of room for debate. Meanwhile, Trump admin deports 100,000 illegal immigrants since inauguration. Frankly, it's a drop in the bucket in relation to what needs to happen, but it's a start. Here we have Holman being interviewed, say a few words about what's happening here. Wow. They've done something so you can't even see when it's about to expire. We don't need it. We'll pass it by. Meanwhile, we just learned a horrible thing Dodge just uncovered. Actually, you knew it all along. 1.3 million in voter fraud. One of the reasons the Democrats wanted all these illegals was to vote Democrat. Just disgusting. Trump teased the news, set will come out very soon. Looks like it's out now. Perhaps this isn't what he was referring to. Perhaps there's something even worse. But this is pretty horrible to me. Let me summarize. Then I'll give you the clip. Featuring the Dodge staffer and close Elon Musk ally Antonio Gracias. Basically, Dodge found a massive fraud ring of 1.3 million illegal aliens who are receiving Social Security payments, Medicare, and voting. Are you surprised? Are you surprised at all? Frankly, I'm not. I mean, it was obvious from the beginning that was what was up. Now, if you want something at least mildly surprising, here you have AOC trounces Schumer in 2028 Senate primary poll. Honestly, this does kind of blow your mind. In a result that's raising eyebrows from Washington and Tel Aviv, an early poll exploring 2028 New York Senate race shows Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez trouncing 26-year incumbent Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer by, get this, a whopping 19 points. Ocasio-Cortez, company called AOC, had been coy about her 2028 ambitions, but the survey has got to have her salivating at the prospect of graduating to Congress's upper chamber. The result may be the first real measure of how much damage Schumer sustained by supporting a Republican-led spending bill that averted a government shutdown. His flip from categorical rejection to grudging support triggered a large swath of the Democrat Party accusing Schumer of clearing a path for Dodge cuts and broader agenda to proceed. I don't think that's bad. I wouldn't hold that against Schumer. But needless to say, a lot of Democrats, especially progressive, are going to be unforgiving. Well, Bersheimer was talking about it. Here's an illustration. Trump plans $500 million funding freeze on Brown University over Gaza genocide protests. Is there anything in the world more worthy of protest than genocide? Provost Frank Boyle acknowledges troubling rumors as dozens of elite universities face investigation following last year's pro-Palestine and anti-genocide protests that rocked multiple American campuses. And in my opinion, all for the good. The Trump admin is planning to halt more than $500 million in contracts and grants awarded to Brown, adding to a list of Ivy League colleges that have had their federal money threatened as a result of their responses to alleged anti-Semitism. Nearly $510 million in federal contracts and grants are now on the line, said the official Thursday, not authorized to speak, only on anonymity. In an email to campus leaders, Brown provost said the university was aware of the troubling rumors. At this moment, we have no specific information. Meanwhile, Princeton, my own alma mater, says Trump administration has suspended dozens of research grants. These are coming from Zero Hedge, by the way. The Trump admin has suspended several dozen federally funded research grants to Princeton as part of its investigation into campus anti-Semitism, which isn't. I mean, these protests against genocide aren't remotely anti-Semitic. Anti-Semitism is to discount or denigrate an individual because they're Jewish, because of their religion or their ethnic lineage. None of that has anything to do with anti-Semitism properly defined. What's happened is an expansion for political purposes to broaden the word to encompass any criticism of Israel, no matter what, is ipso facto, because it's criticism of Israel, anti-Semitic, which is, of course, logically absurd. This is purely political. But the Trump admin is bought into it, which I find disgusting, even repulsive. An email dated April 1st, sent to the campus community by the university president, Christopher Eisgruber, said the university received a notification from funding agencies, including the Departments of Energy, Defense, and NASA.
Now these days are gone, I'm not so self-assured. Now I find I've changed my mind, I'll open up the doors. Help me if you can, I'm feeling...
Two final stories, one I like, one I don't. A bloated IRS prepares cutting workforce by 25%. This one I like. Zero Hedge again. Nearly 2 months after the top Department of Government Efficiency and official and support team arrived at IRS to investigate waste and fraud, aiming to streamline a bloated and corrupt federal bureaucracy. The Trump admin has become a sizable workforce reduction across the federal agency. Fox reported late Friday the IRS will begin laying off about 20,000 staffers, up to 25% of the workforce on Friday through next week. Most job cuts will center around the Office of Civil Rights and Compliance, which protects taxpayers from discrimination, audits, and investigations. Actually, it probably got to do with diversity and inclusion. Here's the one I cannot stand. Male fencer competing in women's division already has 2 gold medals in 6 events. Female opponent says she has nowhere to go. The male athlete's best finish in the men's category was 3rd place. A female fencer who forfeited a match against a male athlete said there are no options for women if men are allowed to compete in women's sports. Stephanie Turner of the Fencing Academy of Philadelphia was set to fence against Redmond Sullivan of Wagner College at a recent tournament, but refused to participate in the sport against a male opponent, took a knee, and forfeited the match. An official approach gave her a black card, disqualifying her from the tournament with the highest tier of penalty possible. According to Fencing Tracker, Sullivan competed in the men's category from 2021 to 2023 against his own gender. His best finish was 3rd place at a May 2023 event. He began competing in the women's category in 24 to 25 season and already has 2 gold medals in just 6 competitions. The first victory in December 2024, the most recent March of 2025. Speaking to Fox, Turner explained she had all the joy of competition sucked out of her as soon as she saw Sullivan's name on the registration list for the recent tournament. I'm disgusting. U.S. Fencing responded to Fox about the incident and defended its policy as being inclusive. USA Fencing enacted our current transgender and non-binary athlete policy in 2023. The policy was designed to expand access to the sport of fencing and create inclusive, safe spaces, but that's doing it the wrong way. Create a category of transgender fencers, for God's sake. Don't mess up women's sports with men. Disgusting.